be alright.
Welcome along to this bonus episode of the Ireland Radar podcast. A little earlier today, I, Ronan Calvert, caught up with journalist, communications expert and photographer Philip O'Connor. We spoke about the rise of the League of Ireland, the rise of the Irish far right, and a little bit about how Elon Musk has disrupted communications platform X in the last year or so, leaving us all confused about how to find good information, what is trustworthy and what is not. I feel Philip is an expert in his field, and I certainly learned a lot from the conversation, and I think listeners will too. To kick off the chat, we spoke a little bit about his friend Zach Albazetti, who he met over in Stockholm while Zach was playing for AIK in Sweden's capital city. I think you'll really enjoy the chat, so just sit back and enjoy. Here it is. Hi Philip, thanks very much for coming on the Ireland Radar podcast. I've been an admirer of your work for a long time, so it's great to speak to you today. How's life in Sweden treating you at the moment? I assume it's pretty cold over there this time of year.
It's getting there all right, Ronan. Thanks very much for inviting me, to be honest. An honour to be here. And at this time of the year, it is. We're looking into the sort of the dark end of the barrel at this stage, you know. And one of the things I've always struggled to get used to is the fact that it gets dark so early in the afternoon here. Actually, last week I was up in northern Norway, up near the Arctic Circle. You know, it doesn't get bright at all, you know, for in December up there. So never gotten used to it. But you know what? We'll have the Christmas lights up soon enough, so that will brighten the place up just a little bit.
I know the feeling. I actually spent a few months over in Stockholm in 2021. I did my Erasmus in Stockholm University.
And you didn't come and play football with me? I'm disgusted.
I didn't. No, I've never played GA, unfortunately. Jeez, my coordination was bad enough trying soccer, so I never really touched a GA. But yeah, that's the one thing. You can always prepare for the cold, but I think those dark days when you wake up, especially when you're hungover, and you get out of bed at about 1 o'clock, it's evening time when you walk outside. It's
well, the sun is already well on its way down there. Now, to be honest, like I gave up drinking years ago, so I don't get hangovers anymore, thankfully. But that was actually part of it, especially in the winter. Like, you know, if you stay in bed past sort of 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, the day just be gone by the time you get up. Jesus, I sound like a granddad now, don't I? You know, somewhere. But if you're, I would suggest if you're going to be hungover, do it somewhere closer to the equator, and at least you get something out of the day, you know.
That's it. And I know you're one friend short this year compared to last year. Zach Albazetti moved home to St. Pat's. Obviously had a great season.
Indeed. He had a brilliant season for St. Pat's when he got back there. I think he had one little tweak of his hamstring there in one game. He had to come off early, but Zach is a fantastic character altogether. Did really well here. It's actually, Jesus, I could talk about Zach for hours and the person he is and the player that he is. But when he came over here, it was brilliant because we've had so few Irish players who have spread their wings and come to places like Sweden or Norway or Denmark or Finland where you can be a full-time professional. It always kind of surprised me, especially post-crash Ireland there, where, you know, fellas would have made a lot of money at Cork City and Dundalk and that kind of thing before, and then they never really sort of came over here. And Zach did brilliantly here in his first season, and then in his second season he suffered a bit of a dip in form and his confidence sort of disappeared, but you couldn't meet a nicer fella. I'm a Bows fan. My father's a Pats fan, so, you know, if he's going to sign for anybody, I'm delighted it was one of those two clubs that he signed for. Great to see him doing well. And I think it's amazing to see as well, like, you know, the class of the player when he comes into the League of Ireland just fits right in there, you know. So I hope he has a good few years at Pats then, and it wouldn't surprise me now if he was to come back to a European league or maybe having to go in England when his contract with Pats is finished. So, and I hope Zach is actually listening to this. I want to wish him all the best. I'm hoping to see him here in Stockholm. I think his girlfriend still lives here, so hopefully I'll meet him for a cup of coffee and a cinnamon bun here in Stockholm soon.
Yeah. Some fika time, is that what you call it over there?
That's what you call it, fika. Jesus, I'll tell you, it's 3 years now, but you haven't lost the language at all, Ronan.
I know. I went to a few matches, or at least 2 anyway, to watch him while over there, and he was so confident at the start, like he was really effective, and even talking to some of the ICO fans over there, they were just saying he's so quick, he's so fast, he's such a threat on the break, and I remember he even scored a couple of fantastic goals at the start. So it's no surprise to see him doing so well for St. Pat's, really. Like, he's always had the talent, ace of, a manager like Stephen Kenny probably helps him a lot by backing him.
Well, I think that's it. And I think with Stephen Kenny, he was very beloved of Stephen Kenny. Stephen was actually part of the reason that he ended up here in Sweden, because Bartos was the manager of AIK when Zach came here. He saw Zach playing for the under-21s under Stephen Kenny, and like Zach basically caused chaos against the Swedes. So it wasn't all these, you know, in inverted commas, big name players. Bartos would look at him and went, that's the fellow I want. But what bothers me, Ronald, and I say this like, you know, a great love for AIK. I have an awful lot of friends who work there and who play there, and one of for a friend of mine coached Zach for a period whilst he was there. And what I couldn't understand was how are you doing this? Why are you not just putting the ball in behind that fullback the whole time, you know? And part of it is to do with chemistry, part of it is to do with tactics, but I couldn't understand. There's a famous goal he scored here, I can't remember who it was against, where he basically ran 3/4 of the length of the field and buried the ball. And then in the following game, I think it was a derby, he had the same chance and he just missed a very, very similar chance altogether. I think if he scored that second chance, I think there's a very good possibility he'd be still here, you know? But, you know, again, football is weird like that, you know. It's very much, you know, people talk about talent and they talk about development and they talk about skills and they talk about learning the game and reading the game and knowing the game, but there's also a huge element of luck and being in the right place at the right time. As Gary Lineker said, I wasn't in the right place at the right time, I was in the right place all the time, you know, and that's really what you need to be to succeed, especially when you're playing abroad.
Yeah, it would have made perfect sense for them to play more through balls through to Zach as well, with Seb Larsson playing centre midfield, well able to pick out a pass as well. So yeah, that's something that struck me at the time as well. But he was obviously part of a St. Pat's team that went on a brilliant run there. I think 9 wins in their last 9 games in the League of Ireland in what was like a spectacular League of Ireland season, really. Like, it really caught the media's attention for the first time, like stadiums packed out, and FAI Cup final, close to 40,000 people there at the weekend as well. I was there and it was a great occasion. So, you know, many people have their theories on why Irish football in the League of Ireland has had its moment in 2024 and maybe in 2023 as well. What do you think are the key factors behind this rise to prominence?
Well, I think a lot of it is to do with the quality of the football on display, and I think Stephen Bradley would disagree with me because he thinks that this season wasn't as good as last season, you know, that kind of thing. That he thought Rovers were a better team, they played better, you know, Shells played good football. But I think what we're actually seeing now was one of the results of Brexit, right? So when Brexit happened in 2016, things changed for Irish players. It wasn't as easy for young players to go. When I played football in Ireland back in the day, we would have fellas going every week to Aston Villa and to Liverpool and to Celtic and to Man City and to West Brom and all these places on trial. Sometimes they would come back the following week, sometimes they would come back 2 or 3 years later, you know. But what didn't happen at that stage was, you know, they didn't stay in League of Ireland clubs. Like, you know, Home Farm was a great club back in the day. Shells would have been a very good club for that. Kevin's would have been great clubs for that. But now we're seeing players staying at home longer. And that combined with the fact that there's actually, you know, full-time wages on offer now. A few years ago, oh God, what's the lad's name? He used to play at Manchester City. Carl Moore was playing at City and he came back to play for Bohemians and that. But Carl was like, you know, one of those young players who went over there, but it was difficult because I met a lot of those players at a FIF Pro event in Oslo in Norway, where the players' unions from Norway, Finland, Sweden and Ireland got together and they did a showcase for out-of-contract players. And what was mostly on offer then for League of Ireland players was 40-week contracts. So they would have a contract for the length of the season, much as NBA players in American basketball would have had back in the 1940s and 50s, you know. It's not sustainable. You know, if a fella has to go and get a job then for the other 3 or 4 months of the year, that kind of thing, to survive and to provide a sort of a good standard of football that people are going to want to pay money to watch, you have to have full-time professional setups, you know. And that is not just paying a fella a wage that he can live on and hopefully put a few bob away for his future. It's having all the things that go around that. It's having your lunch, your breakfast and lunch there every day. It's having physios there. It's having masseuses there. It's having access to facilities and ice baths. Not that I believe in them, you know, but all of those things have to exist for that to happen. And I think Irish football has become much more professional in recent years. That said, I think there's huge potential because the way TV works in Ireland now, I actually commentated on a number of games as part of the project, the pilot project for what became LOI TV. So what you're watching now, I think it was back in 2019, I did games featuring Shamrock Rovers, Cork City, and I think it was Dundalk at the time because according to market research that was done at the time, they were the ones who would be prepared to watch their teams online. And I actually commentated on them from a booth here. They call it doing it off tube. And I did that from here in Sweden just as part of the pilot project, and that went on to become LOI TV. But what they haven't done yet, if you look at places like Scandinavia and like, you know, even countries in France, Italy, Germany, you know, it's a pay-per-view kind of a thing. It's on cable TV and there are millions, like, you know, the TV broadcasters in Sweden pay millions of euros every year to show the domestic league, you know. So we're on our way there. We're not quite there yet. I think LOI TV is an absolutely brilliant service. I think that the commentators, some people go on, oh, you know, well, they're fans or they're not professional commentators. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But I think it's brilliant. I think, you know, I love sitting here and watching on a Friday night in my home in Stockholm, watching Bows or whoever they're playing, or Shells or Rovers or that, you know. It's fantastic and it's getting much better. The football's entertaining, it's compelling, the storytelling around the game has been much better. And if there's one red flag I'd like to raise, Ronan, it's don't close people out, right? Don't do what they've done in the GAA and what they've done in rugby. The Irish Rugby Football Union are notorious all over the world for not giving access to the media. They're the world's worst when it comes to that kind of thing. And I would like to see a situation where I know there's big demands on Damien Duff, and I know there's big demands on Stephen Bradley and that, but talk to people. If necessary, talk to them every day, because now is the time. If people show an interest, and I hate to use the word product when it comes to football, but when we're selling it, essentially that's what it is, right? I would love to see a situation where they are in the paper every day. They are saying things that are of interest every day about their club, about their players, about themselves, and about the game in Ireland, because once I read that every day, I become emotionally invested in that, right? I'm emotionally invested in Bohemians Football Club. I'm emotionally invested in the League of Ireland, right? I don't even report on the League of Ireland because I don't feel that I could do so in any sort of decent, objective manner, you know? So it's very, very seldom I would write anything about Irish football whatsoever, you know? But I think that that's the key. And I do think now that the fan experience is so much better. You know, when you go to grounds, there's hot food, there's bars, there's, you know, people take the piss out of Bows for having craft beers on offer. Pats have always had a bar and that kind of thing. But that's what people want on their Friday night. So give it to them. Let them sing the songs. Let them light the few flares, and, you know, let them be on the television and watch their club doing well. And indeed, travelling to away games is a fantastic experience as well. I remember many years ago going to see Sligo Rovers when Bows were playing up there. You know, so I think it's a great time for Irish football, but we need to keep our eye on the ball now. The progress that's been made now. No more cutting corners. No more going back to the way things were done before. Let's make the game more and more and more professional, so it'll get better and better, and more people will keep coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's been a really positive year, but I think even as soon as the season ended, we got more positive news with stadiums getting funding. So your own Bows, of course, got some funding to redevelop their stadium, Sligo Rovers and Wexford FC as well. We'll all have work underway in the next couple of years to upgrade facilities. That's obviously huge. It's something, you know, Irish football people, your Kerrs and your Stephen Kennys and so forth always speak about. Like, we need more seats, more facilities, and make the match experience improve for everyone. But that's like what we have to do, and have to cash in on this moment and utilise it while it has so much attention, really. So I think that's great news. The other great news in the last couple of weeks as well was Owen Doyle and Shamrock Rovers allowing League of Ireland academies to be recognised as TUSLA recognised childcare services. So an industry is kind of emerging in Irish football, I feel, and that's probably what you want, really. I know through the TUSLA scheme, it'll be, I think it's €2 per hour per player. So in terms of that, the good thing about that is the scalability of it, because there's an incentive to increase the amount of contact hours and then be able to pay coaches properly in a professional environment. So I think that's where we want to go, really, make a whole industry out of Irish football rather than just having this league based off the work of volunteers.
Yeah, but I think another thing we have to remember, Owen, is that, like, who was football for, right? So what Owen is doing, Owen is an absolutely brilliant person altogether, tremendous servant to Irish football, was a great player both in the league and abroad, you know. But I would be wary of, the cream always rises to the top in football, right? So even back in the 70s and the 80s and that kind of thing, going back to when John Giles played football in the streets in the 50s in Ireland, right? The good players will always come through. So what I would like to see is we need to be a very broad nation of active football people and football fans, right? And that means not just focusing on the kids, and it's brilliant. Like, I mean, €2 per hour per player is absolutely brilliant in terms of childcare in Ireland, right? If we can do that. But I would love to see a situation whereby it doesn't happen at the expense of the casual player, of the player like you and me who never played in the League of Ireland but would absolutely love to play the game, right? So I don't want it to become a situation whereby they're de facto sort of academies or feeder systems for academies. That shouldn't be the primary purpose of it. I think the primary purpose of it should be as many young people and old people playing football as possible, as often as possible, for as long as possible. I was out there last Thursday 2 weeks, and it's a shame because it was just before the time you were here. It was just before we sort of formalised how we play football in the Irish community here. We started a Stockholm Gales soccer club as well just after you left. You know, maybe you inspired us to do that, who knows, you know. But so if you come back the next time, you'll be able to play for that team. But that was the thing, was like, I'm out there at 53 having a kickabout on a Thursday night with the lads. We play in a power league, so we did play one season within the league system here. We weren't really organised enough. We didn't have the structures in place. So we went back to the sort of the informal power leagues. It's 7 aside. You turn up, you pay the ref a $5 or whatever, you get on with it. So that to me has to be the foundation of everything. There's that famous John Delaney speech that I think is part of a second captain's bed where he talks about, you know, the chimney being international football. The foundation of football in Ireland has to be that very, very broad church of football fans and of football players. And I think that that's not only beneficial for the game at the very highest level in the League of Ireland and the international teams for men and women, but it creates that, it generates that interest. It makes us feel part of something bigger than ourselves. I was only talking to a fellow the other day when I was up in Norway, and he was saying to me, you know, what team do you support? And I said, well, I don't really have an English team, I have an Irish team. but I always had a good eye for the Irish team, or for the teams in England that had English players. And in my day, they were Liverpool, there were Arsenal, Manchester United. You would have Liam Brady, David O'Leary, Frank Stapleton, Mark Lawrence, and Roddy Whelan, Ray Houghton. You would have had all those. Like Norman Whiteside, I would consider an Irish player, even though he played internationally for Northern Ireland. We never really made that differential in 1982 and 86 when the North were playing in the World Cup, you know. So they were the ones to me. So I felt very much part of that broad church. But at that time, the structures didn't really exist. So, you know, I would love to see a situation where Owen gets in there in Shamrock Rovers, and what better part of the city and the country than South Dublin that has produced Robbie Keane, Damien Duff, Richard Dunn only in recent years, you know, and those players will continue to come through. But I really want to make sure that no child gets left behind, to quote George W. Bush, that we make sure that everybody has the chance to play football as much as possible. And you look at, essentially it's a formalisation of what has always been childcare. Childcare when I was growing up in the 1970s was, here's a Texaco football, find a street with not too many cars on it and get on with it, lads. But to have the likes of Owen involved now, I think is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, 100%. I think we could talk about that whole issue like all day. In fairness to Mark Hannam, as much criticism as he's received for fair reasons, he does seem to have a good plan for a football pyramid there to leave your local club, work their way up to League of Ireland level. I think that's really important. Obviously, a lot of politics in local football. I'm from Limerick myself, like, in Jesus Christ, they can't organise a match without referee problems and fees and politics. But like, hopefully we can get there, and I hope the FAI come down hard and just tell them this is how we're going to do things now, and just stop, you know, this political arguing, which has just ruined Irish football for years now, really. So yeah, hopefully there's a positive turn on the way there. As I said, we could speak about it all day, but while I have you on, I know you obviously have loads of experience in media and reporting, photography, the whole lot, 20 years in Stockholm, I'm fairly sure. So I think just it's hard not to think at the moment about the state of just communications and social media. Obviously, the US election and Musk's effect on that is fairly fresh. We have lots more reporters, musicians and artists leaving X today following Elon Musk's appointment as the lead of efficiency in the US, working on behalf of Trump. So I just want to hear your thoughts on the issues arising from the likes of Elon Musk interfering on X. Like, I use it every day for this Ireland Radar project, and I really wish that that wasn't the case. So yeah, like, what kind of threat is this to society?
Well, I think this is something that's been going on for a long time, and no more than the subjects that we were just talking about Limerick football, about Irish football, about things in general. I think we really need to take a look at who we are as people, right, and who we want to be, both as individuals and as collectives and as communities, right? Now, when we speak specifically about communications and journalism, I've said for many years that since the dawn of the internet in the late 1990s, it has created fantastic opportunities for journalists. It's how we're having this conversation at the moment. We got in touch with one another over the internet. You learned about me over the internet. I learned about you in the meantime over the internet. We're conducting this call over Zoom. The internet has done brilliant things, right? So I've long said that there has never been a better time to be a journalist, but there's never been a worse time to be in the media business, right? And what the media business, I'm not saying the media business, right? Because it has become this thing where nobody has quite worked out how to make a sustainable amount of money out of it without absolutely selling out everything, you know? So if you look at certain newspapers now in Ireland and the UK and America, you know, you click on an article and you just can't get rid of the pop-ups fast enough to read the damn thing, right? There's videos that are auto-starting because that's going to be registered then as a view, you know? Now, the fact that you viewed it for 0.0001 seconds doesn't matter, you know? So all of these things have been tried, and we've lost sight of who the media is for, what purpose it is there for, right? Journalism has always been about taking matters that are in the public interest and reporting them to a broad audience, right? It's a process of verification designed to do that. We've entirely lost sight of that. It's supposed to be one of the pillars of democracy. We've entirely lost side of that as well. It's become a part of capitalism. It's become a part of the political machine. It's become a tool for election. It's become a tool for marketing. It's become all the things that it's actually supposed to protect us against. And I think we do need, alongside playing football with Owen Doyle, I would love to see a situation where you learn football from Owen Doyle in your after school situation, but we also teach media literacy. We need to teach people. I remember one of the things that it still stands out in my education, Ronan, an art school Reach down there. I know you have an art school Reach down in Limerick, but this one's on Griffith Avenue in Dublin, right? And our civics teacher, Anya Nikadi, sat us down one day and she explained to us how to read a newspaper. Now, that sounds absolutely ridiculous in this day and age, but she sat down with a copy of the Irish Times and she said, this is the front page. This is where the most important news goes. This is opposite the editorial. This is a column with somebody expressing an opinion. It's not news. It's not facts. It's somebody's opinion. This is the editorial. This is the stance of the newspaper, right? And that really was when I've always been interested. I've read the newspaper since I was able to read. I've listened to radio, I've watched news. I've always been fascinated by this. But that was the point where I realised that there is a structure to this, and that there is a purpose to this. And anything that you have a structure and a purpose to can always be hijacked and used for other means, you know. I think we very much need to get back to the fundamentals of journalism, right? There's a big overlap in the moment, and what I think a lot of people find difficult in Ireland is to tell the difference between what's straight news reporting and what's comment. And then if you zoom out just a little bit further again, and this is the question that I always tell people to ask when they read anything in the newspaper or see it online or see it on the TV or hear it on the radio, always ask yourself, why this and why now? Who wants me to know this, right? What editor decided that I should know this? Why are they making that decision? Are they making that decision based on their own personal beliefs, on the beliefs of their ownership, on the beliefs of their newsroom, on the beliefs of their trade union or the political organisation they may be a part of, right? I think it's very, very important to understand where our news is coming from, because that helps us to understand why we are being told what we're being told. But the social media age doesn't appeal to that. You know, you'll hear those statistics like that. I think Joe Brolly mentioned it on the Free State podcast recently, that after 200 words, people just get bored and they stop reading, you know. So we now are like kind of media goldfish, where we read something and as soon as it stops being entertaining, we go on to the next thing. Musicians will tell you that statistics show that, you know, when musicians write songs these days, there's no messing around. You know, you have to be straight in, no kissing, just get straight to the hook of the song, or otherwise it's not going to appear on TikTok. Things aren't going to happen with it. And we need to sort of breathe. Not that I do that when I'm speaking to good people like yourself, but we need to sort of be able to be more mindful and consider what it is we're consuming, you know. So maybe less of the sort of the sort of, you know, I think I referred to Fox News recently as a fire hose of fear, which we're all trying to drink from at times, you know. I think we need to be a little bit more discerning, a little bit more judicious and say, okay, maybe I'm not going to read 10 different news websites every day. Maybe I'm going to try to curate my feeds a little bit better. But that has to be an educated process. You have to know what it is you're looking for, and you have to know what it is you're looking at. And there, I think that schools have a big part to play, but not only schools. I think that we as parents and we as community leaders and people involved in our communities and community servants, we have to be involved in that, because young people like yourself don't need me to tell them how to do things, right? But I do think that if I had had the guidance and the knowledge that I know now, I think that I would have made different choices in my life. And I see it as my obligation then, when a person like you who's a good bit younger than me reaches out to me, I see it as my obligation to share the things that I have learned. You're under no compulsion to take anything I say or to do anything I say. But if I can share that and somehow help you to shorten the journey that I have been on, and so that you get to your destination faster, I think that's very smart. And media is so all pervasive nowadays that it's everything we do ends up, be it in mainstream media, on social media, alternative media, everything is there. It's where we live our lives. And therefore I think we should take it very seriously indeed.
Yeah, I think as you touched on, like social media obviously has serious issues, and what we're seeing on our feeds, it mightn't even be from news networks. It can just be from random people online, citizen reporters, as some call themselves. Like, it's just a complete, a big one actually would be the kind of celebrity podcaster, which is very popular among people my age. Like, I'd say 90% of lads my age, when I speak to them, lads who never had any interest in politics, like up until they're 20 years of age, you know, we wouldn't talk about it, like probably like most teenagers. Suddenly you talk to them and it's like completely natural to talk about these American Republican talking points as though it's the most natural thing in the world. And I find it really strange personally, but I suppose that's kind of where the machine tends to be leading people, and particularly Twitter. But look, it's not just like social media either, because a big talking point this year, and I kind of want to know how you would appraise it, which is just the kind of established mainstream media as well, in Ireland in particular. Right, so across this year, I listened to the Free State podcast myself as well, and you know, Mary Lou was talking about how she accepts and invites interrogating questions into Sinn Féin and Sinn Féin's history and Sinn Féin's policies, but that she feels, I think a lot of people who've been following the news feel that same consistency doesn't apply across all of these TV broadcasts, which would be one thing. And we see similar on News Talk, for example, in terms of coverage of the Middle East. I think like the Israeli ambassador has been platformed like multiple times this year. So I mean, for even like older people who aren't on social media, that might be their source of news. And I'm wondering, like, how do you appraise that, and what are the motivating factors at play here that create this narrative towards, I don't know, first of all, in Irish politics, like just preserving the current Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael coalition, and then also towing this line on Israel as well. It does seem quite disheartening to follow, because it seems at odds with what Irish people in reality maybe think.
Well, I think that's a very valid point that you make there, Ronald, because like there's so many Irish people, for instance, who identify with the Palestinian cause. There are so many people, especially people of your age and people of your generation, who don't remember or who haven't got a living memory of their own of what Sinn Féin used to be, right? And I think it's like part of it on behalf of the media is deliberate, in that they don't want left-wing or centre-left parties in power, because it means they'll have to pay more taxes on their profits. And journalists now, it's gone from being a trade to being a profession. So people do earn more. The people are lucky enough to earn a living in journalism. Many of them earn more, especially, the established political correspondents and TV broadcasters. Some of them are earning hundreds of thousands of euros. At the other end of the hourglass, you have freelance journalists who are only earning a pittance, But it's those people who are in positions of power and who have something to protect. They quite naturally, their reflex is to defend power at all times, because that's what keeps them with the power that they have. I think the Sinn Féin are definitely treated differently, right? Because you have the history of them being the political wing of the IRA. But the difference between Sinn Féin, people would present this to me, because the Sweden Democrats are a far-right party with their roots in neo-Nazism here in Sweden. One of their original committee members had actually served in the Waffen-SS as a volunteer in the Second World War, right? So they are undeniably have their roots in racism and in Nazism, right? Sinn Féin undeniably have their roots in the sort of physical force tradition of republicanism. The difference to me between Sinn Féin and the Sweden Democrats is that Sinn Féin have changed. The Sweden Democrats haven't, right? Their politics are still racist. Their politics are still neo-Nazi. They're still neoliberal. They're still all those things. Sinn Féin have gone from being the political wing of the IRA to being a solely democratic political party, right? The media still decides to treat them as the political wing of the IRA because it's an easy thing to do. Rather than interrogating what Sinn Féin are saying and stand for in 2024, they want to interrogate and see what Sinn Féin stood for in 1984, which was an entirely different party, entirely different membership, entirely different setup, right? And that, to me, you mentioned your friends now listen to American Republican podcasters, and those things become their talking points, right? There has been an utter failure on the part of legacy media to address the concerns of young people and the attitudes of young people in Ireland. We absolutely have not opened up ourselves to that, right? And I often say about, people like yourselves, there are people that everybody talks about you, but nobody talks to you. How many people of your age are involved in media now? How many of you have a podcast with 100,000 listeners in Ireland? How many of you are allowed to read the news or interview Mary Lou MacDonald or that kind of thing? Right? And the answer is none. You're never going to be given that. And if you tweet any sort of support about Sinn Féin all of a sudden, like I've been pointing this out now for weeks, since a couple of scandals that sort of came up around Brian Stanley and the senator whose name I can't recall now, sending inappropriate texts. O'Mungala. But so I happen to say, okay, so what's all this about? Like, so in one case, Sinn Féin followed the letter of the law in terms of having an internal disciplinary proceedings that led them to make reports to the Gardaí. In the other, it didn't, and both were apparently wrong. It's like, this isn't right. This is not fair. It's not a good way to look at it. In recent days, we've had somebody arrested for a murder that happened more than 30 years ago in Ireland, the murder of Jojo Dollard, and it was the lands of a former Fine Gael TD who is now deceased were searched. Not a word. I haven't heard anybody going to Simon Harris and saying, there are questions that need to be answered. What was going on there? Nora Owen, the former Justice Minister, apparently was in touch with the victim's family at the time and, was alleged to have obstructed in some way or not being as helpful maybe she should have been. Can you imagine if there had been a Sinn Féin Justice spokesperson? Your headlines would be full of it. News talk would be ringing off the air about it. And I think that the lack of plurality and the lack of, I think it's almost a lack of consciousness about the whole thing. And what bothers me most, I'd say, Roland, is that people don't realise it, right? So you speak to any producer, any journalist, any presenter in Ireland, and they would say, no, I'm impartial and I'm objective, right? I go, are you really? Are you really that impartial objective? Are you telling me you've no blind spots whatsoever? Because if you are the only person in the world who doesn't have any, right? I am 100% conscious of the blind spots that I have. I know what I personally believe politically, but I also know what my role as a journalist is. As I mentioned to you earlier, it's a process of verification. I sat down with Mary Lou McDonald in Dáil Éireann in February, right? And I quite like the woman on a personal level. Anybody who supports the Dublin Gaelic footballers is fine by me, right? I would agree with a lot of her policies. I think that her attitude towards the Irish diaspora, of which I am a member, is quite excellent, I would have to say. But the moment I press record that's all bets are off. That's when I have to sit her down and speak to her on behalf of the people I'm representing, the readers and the writers, the readers and the listeners and the viewers that I have. I'm not there to be her friend, right? And every time she sees me with a microphone in my hand, I want her to be scared. I want Leo Varadkar to feel that little bit of fear, or Simon Harris, or Micheál Martin. I don't care if you're a good husband or a good partner, a good wife, a good father, a good mother. That's not what I'm judging you on. I am judging you on what you are saying for and doing to the Irish people. That's your profession. That's it. It's not a judgment on you as a person, right? If you show me that you're a dickhead, I will tell people that that's what you are, right? But that's where we need to be. But there's such a level of clientelism in Irish journalism at the moment that people are afraid of being put outside the Galway tent in inverted commas or in brackets, right? They're afraid to lose access because they're critical, right? And you know what? If you lose access because you're critical, that's fine, right? That in itself becomes a story, because it becomes clear to me then that the people who don't invite me to press conferences, or who don't invite me to do interviews, or who turn down my request for interviews, or who cancel them at the last minute, as has happened on many occasions with Irish government representatives, they're telling me who they are, right? And that in itself becomes part of my reporting and part of my story. So I think we've a lot to learn, but I do think that an awful lot of it could be changed by giving people like yourself, by giving a plurality of voices, trade union members, gay people, trans people, people who have come to Ireland seeking international protection. By giving them a voice in our media, all of a sudden I think the landscape would change, because very few people in your generation would make that Sinn Féin IRA connection. And to be honest, I think we're past it. When all those things come up, like, why don't we talk about housing as much as we talk about the IRA? Why don't we talk about healthcare? Why don't we talk about childcare? Why is it down to Owen Doyle to look after kids for two quid per player per day? Why isn't the state paying for all these things? Where does all the Apple money go? Why did, a government spend years trying not to accept 13 billion in taxes? These are all the questions that we should be asking, rather than echoing the Sinn Féin of 1984 and trying to make everybody believe that they can't be trusted.
Yeah, I'm wary here now that we only have 7 minutes left on the clock, but if I could ask you to answer this one fairly briefly, which is challenging enough in its own right, I mean that because of the question, not because you talk at such length so eloquently, but about just to hit the kind of, I suppose next week will mark a year since the riots in this country and the rise of the Irish far right, which I'd imagine is, well, in my view at least, very much connected to the anger of working class people and the pressure that they've been put under by the lack of facilities and opportunities afforded to them. You've seen the rise of the Swedish far right, I think, in the time you've been there, and the problems that have arisen. What's stopping Ireland from seeing a similar pattern? And just to squeeze this one in, what's stopping that from spreading into Irish football culture as well? Seeing that League of Ireland would probably be the most kind of working class kind of sports sector of Ireland. I think, if those people are frustrated and there's anger there and they're being manipulated by misinformation, what's stopping us from having a bit of a fan culture problem?
Well, I think it's not solely limited to the working class, because if you look through over history, I spent most of the Euros this year in Berlin, and I spent a lot of time, sort of studying what had happened there in the pre-war period, the 1920s and the 1930s. So it's quite a complex issue, but I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible, right? What we have done is that we've led people, and especially people who are being let down by the state, who don't have, after school care, who don't have homes, who don't have secure jobs, who don't have healthcare, right? We have led them to believe that they are in competition with people seeking asylum, people seeking refuge, people fleeing war in Ukraine and Syria and in Lebanon and in Palestine, right? They're not. There's enough to go round. We're one of the richest countries in the world, and the tiny sliver of tax that we take from Apple and Pfizer and from all those could pay for these things 10 times over, right? But because we want to protect the profits of the powerful, what we've done is we've told them that they're in competition for it. And then, the media has sort of sleepwalked into the entire thing. I mean, when I see them just making the same mistakes over and over again, platforming people and talking about, sunlight is the best disinfectant and everything else like that, it's just depressing, because none of these things have worked anywhere else, and Ireland is in no way exceptional. I think football, we have quite a good fan culture in Ireland in that it's quite benign. and it does seem to be quite compassionate, you know. So I do think that we need to have that compassion rather than competition in all aspects of Irish civic life. And I think that's what we need to protect against. I also think that there's a very sort of small tail that wags the dog, right? There's a statistic that says that in any riot, only 10% of people actually take part in the violence, but the other 90% through their tacit support lets that violence happen. As soon as they remove that support, the riot is over. And any police officers who work for these things will tell you that, right? So what we need to do, I think, is we need to be compassionate towards those who think that they're competing for scarce resources when they shouldn't be competing and those resources aren't scarce. But we also need to be very hard on those who are seeking to achieve power and notoriety and fame through violent means. I don't think that we can accept that on our terraces. I don't think we can accept that on our streets. I don't think we can accept that in our parliament either. And if that sounds hard, that's fair enough, right? But I'm all about human dignity. I'm all about inclusiveness, right? The UN Declaration of Human Rights guarantees these rights to life and liberty to all of us. And anybody who's going against that, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to put the foot down and say that that's not okay. You're more than welcome to come to me. Anybody's more than welcome to come to me and discuss the issues that they have in terms of housing and health and all those things that lead to a dignified life. But I absolutely will not accept that that has to take place at the expense of anybody else, especially not somebody who's in a weaker position in our society than I am or you are or many of your listeners are.
All right, thanks very much, Philip. And finally, before we go, every week we sign off with a song from an Irish artist. We've already had songs from the likes of Villagers, Fiona Regan and New Dad. Is there a song you'd like to choose for this week's podcast to see us out?
There is indeed, and it's quite an old song written by a Dublin band called The Brilliant Trees, right? But it was put out on Spotify in 2025, and I'd really love for you to share it with our listeners. The song is called Talents. The band are from Finglas. I think I played the festival with them in Germany back in 1995. Beautiful guitar work, right? But it's the message of the song, you know, you'll hear it in the chorus now. Don't waste your talent, right? You have one life. Go out there, make the most of it. See the world as you've already done, or a little bit of it in Stockholm. Enjoy your football, enjoy your music, and grab that sense of community and that sense of compassion, because I grabbed it a few years ago and it's led me to feeling what I has been as a really rich life and a really rich set of experiences that I couldn't have had without that open view of the world.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Philip. Really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.
This is the right time. This is a great time for you. Why waste your time? Only one try. Take a risk and further your life. They will pull you down. They will pull you down. For the last time you have desires, you could say at least I tried. Don't waste your talent. Don't waste your talent. They make you crawl. They always do. They make it harder for you. They always do. This is the right